David Seymour. And look, I wasn't actually going to play this first part of the conversation. I was going to get straight to what Chlöe had to say, because they're talking about the Waitangi Tribunal here. They're talking about Karen Chichihoho being invited, being summoned to the Waitangi Tribunal, and her basically just not having a bar of it. And now the government, I believe, is going to court to say they don't have to go. It's a weird thing because they're really clear in the tribunal, the Waitangi Tribunal is not a court. I don't know if it can summon you legally, sort of thing, but they're now going to court to make sure that they don't summon you. It's a bizarre thing. Anyway, I am going to play the first little bit of David Seymour, because as we always say, he always plays the race card. He always plays the race card. And in this little 60 seconds, I just wanted to play it for you, because the first thing he does in defending why they shouldn't speak to the Waitangi Tribunal is play the race card. I'll be back in a moment while you're watching this. I'm going to go get my dog.
Well, first of all, let's be clear. The Waitangi Tribunal is not a court. Karen Chlöe is a minister who's been part of a government that's been elected. She's going through the process of making a policy, taking papers to Cabinet and ultimately introducing a law to Parliament. That law will stop things like the reverse uplifts, where a kid gets put in a home for life and then gets taken out because the Oranga Tamariki decided it was sometimes more important that you're in a house with a particular race than one where you're safe. I mean, that's how despicable this law has been. Karen's getting rid of that.
What an absolute idiot!
Would argue that they're going to argue this in court today or something along these lines. That actually, as a government, we have a right to make policy without being hauled in by this tribunal, which is not a court. They should be respecting our part of the world, just as we should be respecting theirs.
Which they're absolutely not. He says we should be respecting theirs whilst we sit here and actively disrespect it, which is utterly redonkulous. Sorry, you go.
The false equivalence that he just drew between there of them trying to balance being in a house of their own culture or family versus, and it just a black and white choice here, or being safe.
Yeah,
because you've got to be one or the other.
Yeah.
Now I know the case that he's trying to score political points off, and it's a shit show. Like, it's a really challenging case, and I don't think it has been handled particularly well. And it's kids that are bouncing between an organization that was at that point going through a seismic shift of, like, maybe us taking brown kids off their family and giving them to white families more often than not is not a great thing to do. So maybe we need to do more consideration about placing people with whānau. But yes, again, if you're brown, dangerous.
It's so stupid,
dangerous
though.
For kids.
It's so stupid. Like, when you take Māoridom out of the equation, you make it a different equation, right? Then it's really, you can see when it falls apart. So okay, let's just do that. Let's just say you had French migrants to New Zealand, right? Let's just say that the 7-year-old from the French migrants only spoke French, right? Would it be better? Would that child likely be better understood, better communicated with all these things? And I'm not talking about kids only speaking Māori. I'm talking about a similar culture. If that child was then put for care and with a New Zealand family that didn't know anything about France, didn't know anything about the language, didn't know anything about the culture, or is it likely they'd be better, have a better chance of success going in with a family at the very least who knew a lot about France and knew a lot about the culture and knew how parents and children interacted? Well, of course we know the answer, it's redundant, but as soon as you're in New Zealand and you can't see that perhaps a Māori child would do better with a Māori family, if you try and say that, well, that's just by their race, as soon as you take that argument and replace it like I've just done, you can see how nonsensical it is. There's a way that these families, yes, they're all Kiwis, we're all the same, but you know what? We function differently. The household runs differently. There's different expectations from a European with a European-centric kind of family value or family operating system than there is from a Māori one. It's just how it goes. So what's the problem?
It's also completely ignoring what has happened in New Zealand historically and overseas historically, where in colonial countries there was a real run of taking Indigenous kids off their families, who of course couldn't fucking raise them, according to the colonial state, and given to white families. You've got an entire generation of stolen children in Australia.
Stolen generation, yeah.
Yeah, like literally stolen. Here in New Zealand, would just take Māori kids off their families and put them in a borstal. And that's how we gave birth to our gang problem.
Yeah.
Like just a generation of broken, damaged kids raised in abusive state institutions. And I think for him to just write that off of like, well, this government department is just giving this namby-pamby woke consideration to the ethnic background of these kids, rather than making sure that they're safe. You can do both. That's my expectation, is that you weigh those two things together. It's not a black and white dichotomy.
Yeah.
Like if you read the story, I think it was News Hub that put it out about this case, about like there were some kids that were uplifted. They were siblings, and there was they were going to split them up, because who can foster? I think it was 4 or 5 kids in one hit. There's not many people out there, and a family put their hand up, and they did, and they were an English family, but they were very conscious of the fact that they were Māori children, and they were going to reach out to the local marae, and they sounded like they were going to put in all the effort. And then down the track, they found some family members that offered to take them. Now that for any case manager, that's a terrible choice to make. And it sounds like Oranga Tamariki absolutely fumbled that process. And left everybody feeling completely shithouse. Things were said. It's a dog's breakfast. But this is the thing, that it's a complicated situation. If you fuck it up, you ruin a life. Well, you ruin several lives. You know, somebody is going to be put out. And I think to have David Seymour wading into something like that with all the tact and understanding that he lacks, and he's just going to go, I'm going to make points off the racial element here. He is the worst person. He is.
I've heard that somewhere.
Every time he's the worst person.
All right. Well, let's get back to the story now. Chlöe is asked about Karen Shaw, and quite an easy question, quite a simple question from Lloyd Burr. But Lloyd just basically goes, should she just have gone to the Waitangi Tribunal? Like just gone along rather than making such a big hubbub? And that was the question to prompt this part of the conversation.
I mean, that would be entirely in line with the doctrine of parliamentary supremacy. The kind of hot take that I'm getting from all of this is that the government is terrified of accountability. They have been legislating incredibly quickly without all too much kind of opportunity for public participation. So let's just get a few facts straight. So the Section 7AA came into effect in 2017. Actually, David voted for it, as did Dr. Parmjit Palmer, who gave a speech in support of it at third reading. And that inserted not the kind of things that David's talking about with regard to uplifts, but commitment to Te Tiriti o Waitangi and reporting requirements for the chief executive of Oranga Tamariki.
So this is really important. The 7AA, as far as I understand it, one of the biggest things about it is the CEO needs to write reports based on how the kids are being looked after. So a big part of this is just what it is a way to measure how they're going. That's a big part about 7AA. I don't think I show it in this clip, but it does say it in this conversation. And I just think, once again, the government, as I think Chlöe just said, is kind of scared of being, of accountability. All the things that they've cancelled and all the things that they said they'll no longer do, and all the, looking at information, getting assessments on the information, they're going to ignore all of that stuff. And this to me seems like, and I've asked for some professional help to come on and explain more to us about 7AA, but it seems like a big part of it is the CEO being accountable for what's happening, especially when it relates to inclusion of the contractual agreement the Crown has with Māori, reporting on that. And that's what they're getting rid of. So therefore, there will no longer have to be any kind of accountability from the CEO. There'll no longer have to be any kind of reports made about what's happening with this contractual agreement, the founding document of our nation, between Māori and the Crown. So I don't think we get that in full from the clips I've showed you, but I kind of wanted you to know based on my understanding. So anything, Chlöe, or should we keep going?
No, keep rolling.
Tamariki. So if they have concerns about how that's being applied, we should have that debate and we should have that evidence in the public arena. The Waitangi Tribunal is a place to do that. Another thing to note is that the reason that Karen Shah has been summoned in front of the Waitangi Tribunal is because she refused to participate in giving them any written or oral evidence voluntarily. So again, there is an opportunity here for meaningful accountability, for public discussion, for evidence to be aired, and for us to have a rational debate about how we legislate moving forward and what commitment to Te Tiriti o Waitangi looks like. Because this is about reducing disparities for Māori children in state care. The other point...
Look at David Seymour's face. I know you don't want to, but just the kind of eye-rolling, smirking, shaking of his head, the dismissive nature. I've actually got a clip later on, and it's I've titled it Seymour patronising Chlöe again and playing the race card again. It's just... if these two were having a debate at school, he would be not just second, he'd be about ninth out of two people. He doesn't ever offer anything, any form of valid conversation based around evidence or research. It's always vibes. And just how he's even acting right now, it's just revolting. It's revolting.
Do you know, like, this is a great comparison between him and Chlöe, right? Just, it doesn't matter the subject, it's always the same. Chlöe has to speak rapidly.
Yeah.
Right? Because she's got such a short amount of time to express, like, quite complex concepts and provide their context.
Yeah.
So she goes hell for leather.
Yeah, for sure.
And then we cross to Seymour, who can speak very slowly because he's just talking about vibes, and these things don't come into it. And people have told me, and people feel this. He doesn't have to. He's not imparting complex ideas. He's not putting things in its context. He doesn't have to do what Chlöe has to do. He doesn't have to work hard to be a shitty person. It can just flow sedately like a river of bullshit.
In fact, I've heard he's the shittiest person on the face of the planet from some people. Let's just get to the end of this clip.
That I would make is that, look, those who are advocating to retain Section 7AA in place are the Children's Commissioner, survivors of abuse in state care, many experts, and those on the front line. On the other side, you have National Act in New Zealand First.
What do you...
That would be called a mic drop. If I didn't value my equipment so much,
It's a mic
I just
spike.
pick it up and I just drop it. Yeah, and that's often what's happening, isn't it? You go to the experts, the people in the field, the advocates, the people who are all involved with it, and you're like, they all say the opposite from what you're saying. National Act, New Zealand First government. What does that mean? There's never really an answer for that. But any thoughts, Chlöe, before we go on to the next clip?
No, I got all of my thoughts out.
So in this next clip, David Seymour was trying to sell the point that is the tribunal trying to be a part of the legislation system. So he's trying to make the point that, you know, they're actually nobodies. The tribunal means nothing. We're elected, we make the law. They actually aren't a part of the system. This is only a 30-second clip, so let's just have a listen to what he's got to say.
I mean, Chlöe is not seriously proposing a system of government where you get elected and then you have to be accountable to the Waitangi Tribunal. That's not how New Zealand
But
works.
only when you
Never
start
has.
removing
It was
Waitangi
never-
from
Tribunal
Waitangi from legislation. That's
never
their
the
role.
intention. Well, actually,
Yeah, so he was being talked over, but the point Lloyd made was, if you're taking Treaty of Waitangi out of legislation, that's when you should go and talk to the Waitangi Tribunal, because what's going to happen when you take it out is they're going to then challenge it and take you to court to try and get it put back in. So Lloyd's actually right here, and Chlöe agrees with Lloyd, where he says, no, unless you are removing Treaty of Waitangi from legislation, Treaty of Waitangi obligations from legislation, then yes, they're going to want to talk to you. And David Seymour just talked over him the whole time and refused to kind of say it because, you know, Waitangi Tribunal, who cares? They weren't elected.
No, it's not. It's not their role to tell us how to govern. We're an elected government. The Waitangi Tribunal was created by an elected government to do certain things, and it was never anticipated that they would become an accountability mechanism for ministers, where ministers could be called in and forced to explain themselves. And
it's not necessarily what they're doing right now. They're looking for a clue. Oh, did I forget to have that on the screen? Sorry, I was looking two ways. Did I not have that up when I was playing? Just the audio, was it?
Yeah.
My bad. We'll do the next one anyway. But there you go. So Seymour's trying to say, well, they're not allowed to tell us what to do. We've been elected, they haven't. And Lloyd pointed out, sorry, it was Lloyd, talking if you couldn't see the pictures, Lloyd pointed out that when you remove obligations relating to the Treaty of Waitangi from legislation, then they're going to get involved. And David's response is, meh, we're not going to talk. We don't have to talk to them.
Well, Peter makes a good point in the chat here. Section 3 of the Treaty of Waitangi Act. This act shall bind the Crown.
Yeah.
So, does it, David? David?
Yeah. And the very last clip I've got for you, it's mostly actually just because there's this rumor going around the BHN chat that David Seymour is the worst person in the world. And so let's just show you a little part of the patronizing nature that is known as David Seymour.
Secondly, Chlöe says, there's no data, there's no evidence. I'm the only one with data and evidence.
Well, here's the question. Well, we want it in the public arena.
That's a summary of what you say every week. Now, basically,
smarmy
the
cock.
question is, how many kids being taken out of safe homes and being put out of violent ones would be an acceptable number? If you want data and evidence, I'm sure you can get it. But here's a principle. Every kid should be treated with the same love and respect regardless of race. And that's what this government is committed to.
The point of Section 7AA, by the way.
How much?
So that's the whole, what we're just saying. So David Seymour literally says, well, we can all find data and evidence, but this is the feeling, which is exactly coming back to the point that this government, and in particular David Seymour, as we see him get shown up so often on these morning shows, run from data, especially, well, mostly because most research seems to disagree with it. I mean, he literally just said that, we've all got evidence, but this is what it feels like.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, again, he doesn't understand the history. He doesn't understand what it's trying to achieve. He doesn't care what this is. This is a political, race-baiting, point-scoring mechanism for him. It is not about the kids. It is not about the victims. It is not about state safe homes or anything like that. Not for David Seymour. Just points. Just debating points.
Kia ora again, whānau. The clip you've just watched is brought to you today by our patrons. If you want to be a part of what we do, if you want to get behind what we're doing, if you're enjoying our content and wanting to share our content, then maybe you would consider being a patron to Big Hairy News. Head to www.patreon.com/Big Hairy News to sign up to one of our levels and be a patron. At this point, we are only a listener and viewer supported show. It all comes down to you guys. If you feel like jumping on board to help, then head to patreon.com/Big Hairy News. Hooroo.